Hi, my name is John Perrine. I'm the Conservatory Manager here at Gulfshore Playhouse and the Director of Romeo and Juliet.
And I'm Stephen Kalakos, the Director of Education at Gulfshore Playhouse.
Well, anytime that I am looking at a directing project in the eye, I tend to ask myself, why this story right now? And I think when you are presenting a play that is over 400 years old, I think that question is doubly important. And so I was asking myself, what does it mean for an ensemble of young people to tell the story of Romeo and Juliet today? And I reflected on the fact that I, like many other people, was introduced to Romeo and Juliet in the walls of my English classroom. And there was something about being surrounded by young people when we were studying that, because it's a story that is about the everyday tragedies of being a young person, of having your first big crush and facing the pressures of your parents and the other adults in your life. And so I think it was a really natural progression to set this story in a modern day classroom as we start to explore what it means to fight against the expectations that society has on us, the idea of society being the school that we find ourselves in every day. When I first started to prepare to direct Romeo and Juliet, I thought back on the fact that I, like many others, read Romeo and Juliet in high school, and I remember enjoying it, and I remember watching some film adaptations that were really cool. But the first time that I really felt like I understood why we continue to tell this story is when I read an adaptation by Joe Calarco called R&J, in which he has all of the characters portrayed by four boys at an all-boys boarding school under the cover of night in secret. And there was something so dangerous about that adaptation. There was something so exciting, and it made me realize, what is at stake for Romeo and Juliet in that play. And so that's when I started to realize, oh, this is really what's going on in this play. And that planted a seed many years ago when I read that play for the first time. And then when we first started to finalize us doing this production, I watched a film adaptation by the National Theatre in London that they created in 2020, in the early days of the pandemic, where they quarantined a bunch of professional actors in their building, and over the course of a couple weeks, they filmed a full adaptation of Romeo and Juliet inside the walls of the National Theatre, running around the entire space, in order to keep actors employed and in order to keep creating art in a time that we thought live theater was never going to come back. And that production starts in a rehearsal room, and over the course of the play, all of Verona and all of Mantua becomes slowly more and more real as we start to implement more theatricality to it. And that production was just a real celebration of the dramatic imagination. And I think that's something that always inspires me as an artist. And so I really want to capture that same kind of energy as the young ensemble in the classroom that this production of Romeo and Juliet is set in. As the play progresses, the students are going to be able to take a lot more autonomy over how they utilize the classroom around them to create Verona and to create the balcony and to create the streets and the mausoleum. I think it's going to be a really exciting discovery process for the actors. And then you also look at this past Broadway season with the Broadway revival of Romeo and Juliet with Rachel Zegler and Kit Connor, which brought the youngest audience base in Broadway history in recent years by a large margin. And so I think it's a story that young people really want to look at. Also in conversation with Broadway's recent production of John Proctor's The Villain, my favorite play of the 21st century, maybe my favorite play of all time. And it's because it's a play that really looks at young teenagers as really fully formed humans who have lived experiences that are valid and really shape a unique point of view of why are we telling these classic stories today? What is it about them, and should we be telling them? And how do we as contemporary 21st century young adults contend with those ideas? So all of those things together really made me realize that setting this play in a contemporary American high school in the year of our Lord 2025, I think it's going to open up a lot of eyes to why are we telling Romeo and Juliet today, and what relevance does it have to young people now? For this production of Romeo and Juliet, we are presenting it in our Struthers studio, which is a really cool performance space because the seating is super flexible. It can be in a bunch of different seating arrangements. And for this production, we will have the first time of setting our play in an alleyway setting, which means that there will be two parallel seating banks along the long edge of the stage, with the playing space being in the middle of the room. So I'm collaborating with a Houston-based scenic designer named Afsana, and we are creating a classroom that feels very lived in, feels almost forgotten, and feels like it's just this catch-all space for anything that could be turned into the world of Verona. And so we, as director and scenic designer, are having a lot of fun of what is the storytelling potential for anything that we can put in this room. And I think it's going to empower the young actors to have a lot of creativity and a lot of autonomy over how they create the world around them. Not only that, the alleyway setup is going to be really fun for the audience as well, because depending on which seating bank you're in, you're going to get a really different kind of performance experience. Based on how close or far away an actor is at any given time, you're going to have a different kind of point of view about that character's journey over the course of the play, much like the competing forces of the Montagues and the Capulets. And so this arrangement, I think, is going to really highlight some certain themes as far as warring clans and different points of view and how can we find common ground in different points of view. So it's a really exciting opportunity for us.
Producing this adaptation of Romeo and Juliet in Struthers Studio at Gulfshore Playhouse is really special under the helm of John here, who is directing, because part of our mission is to challenge our conservatory students. And we've produced musicals and we've produced plays for them before, but this is something very unique and very different and very special for our teens here in Collier County. And Romeo and Juliet has been around for centuries, and we want to make it accessible, and we want to make it understandable, and we want to make it relevant to our teens, because this is a story that has been told and shown over generations and generations, and it's about time that our students here at Gulfshore Playhouse get that opportunity.
I think that Shakespeare is such a great playwright for students who are developing performance skills or are going to try it for the first time, because he's a playwright who is writing for people who didn't have a ton of acting training. He wrote his language to be to find a natural rhythm in how they usually speak, and he wrote in a way that made it very clear which words should be emphasized and which words are the important parts of each phrase. And so I think that it's a great training ground for students to develop skills that then they can apply to contemporary playwrights.
For those teens who are very serious about pursuing acting as a career, you can't avoid Shakespeare. And so we welcome the challenge of any teen who wants to experience this with us to come audition, because ultimately this is going to help your skills in acting and ultimately make you a better, not just actor, but a human being by understanding the text within this play.
So we are asking actors to prepare 15 to 20 lines of a Shakespearean speech or monologue, which is about 60 to 90 seconds of material. That should be memorized, which I get can be a little intimidating to memorize something that feels so foreign. Something that helps me when I'm memorizing Shakespeare is I like to write it in my own words. Once I understand what the big idea is, it's way easier for me to kind of learn this language that I'm a little less familiar with. And there are plenty of resources online to help you out with that. But again, we're looking for 15 to 20 lines of a Shakespearean monologue, and those auditions are September 8th.
And I'll say, anytime we hold auditions within the Conservatory at Gulfshore Playhouse, we always have this philosophy within the audition room to make it fun. We want to make auditioning an enjoyable experience. So though auditioning in general can feel daunting, rest assured that you have the full support of the team within the audition room here at Gulfshore Playhouse.
I think I'm excited for this to be an opportunity for students to explore performance in a way that they probably haven't before. I know a lot of schools and organizations in the area are producing musicals and contemporary plays, but being able to dive into something totally different, I think is a really unique and exciting opportunity for us at Gulfshore Playhouse.
What's very exciting about teens in Southwest Florida auditioning and performing in our production of Romeo and Juliet is that nobody's doing it. We're the only ones right now that are producing a Shakespeare play for teens, written for teens, for teens. So we encourage anybody who wants to dabble in Shakespeare, who has always been interested in Shakespeare, to come audition for us, because it's going to be a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity.
If I were to have the chance to talk to someone who's maybe a little on the fence about auditioning, I would say it's never going to hurt to try, right? You never know what kind of doors will open by taking this opportunity. And so my biggest encouragement anytime someone is a little apprehensive to take an opportunity is that going out and trying is never going to hurt. You never know what you're going to learn by being in a Shakespeare play. It might not just be about you're learning how to perform a Shakespearean play, but maybe you meet the best friend that you never knew that you needed. So being able to participate in theater with people your age, I think is a really unique opportunity that I think anytime an opportunity presents itself, I think you should jump right in.